I want to thank Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies for the honor. It's really deeply meaningful to me. It's an important award at ETSU, and I'm humbled by it. Also, I want to thank ETSU for all of the support that allowed me to do the research that I did. So travel money, grant money, the freedom to pursue the kinds of research that was of interest to me, that I could be passionate about. So I'm just deeply appreciative of that. Also, I want to thank my children, my daughter Chelsea, who has lived away from me, far, far away for 7 years, is now living locally and is here. So thank you, Chelsea. And I'm thanking the children because it's an awkward thing to be writing about motherhood in the other room, not being a mother in this room. And so I'm like, yeah, I know, mommy loves you. Anyway, so I just appreciate the sacrifices of time with me when I was trying to create work that afforded more respect and honoring of mother work. And then lastly, I want to thank my partner, Patrick, who thinks I'm amazing, like always telling me that I'm beautiful, that I'm brilliant, that I'm passionate, that like all the things. And I learned how to see me through his eyes. And that has changed everything. Okay, so the title of my talk, do I have any Stephen Colbert fans out here? Yay, okay. All right, so this is sort of modeled after a book of his. The title of my talk is called I Am an Imposter and So Can You. Lessons I continue to learn and learn and learn over and over and over and over again. Okay, so to know my story is to know that I live the life of an imposter. I got into Purdue University's doctoral program, for example, because my advisor was very close with a faculty member in that department to which I was applying. Or they had a low number of applicants that year. I'm not really sure. Or they were being nice. One of those, I don't know. But I'm pretty crafty, actually. I mean, nothing to admire or brag about, mind you, but just enough that I'm able to figure out how to fly just beneath the radar so people don't find out that I'm faking it. So using this crafty flight of mine, this low air craft, is a kind of trickery that I learned fairly early. Maybe when I moved across the Sunshine State from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa by way of Alligator Alley, with my community college associate's degree in hand, to go to the seemingly formidable 4-year institution of University of South Florida. And I think that might have been my first successful dupe, actually, was getting into University of South Florida. Maybe that's when all this trickery began and making people think I was good enough or smart enough or right enough. But it probably actually started much earlier. When you grow up in a home with a rageaholic and abusive father, you grow up wary, keenly attuned to how your behavior might be read by others. So always ready, though you never really are ready, for some kind of violent outburst of tremendous belittling or hurting proportions, whether by hands or words or any variety of disciplinary weaponry. So not doing things right or right enough, with right always being a moving target, had very dangerous consequences for me as a child. And then conversely, but strangely similarly, doing things right, like getting good grades in school, were dangerous too, but not for me. They were dangerous for my sister, who had a very hard time with grades, which my father would rage and assault about. So report card time was very hush-hush in our family. My mother would just sort of secretly sign them and send them back to school in our backpacks. If I had proclaimed, what I learned from that is if I had proclaimed my accomplishments, it would have meant violence for my sister. So I learned that recognition for successes was no good for other people. So I never put stock in mine. So I guess that's where I first learned this craft of flying under the radar, and maybe that's where I developed such a pronounced concern about either my inadequacies or my accomplishments being found out. I did get into USF, though, and I did manage to get a bachelor's and a master's degree there in communication. But I also managed to share space with an alter ego. I now think of it as my Parcher. Parcher is the Ed Harris character in the film A Beautiful Mind, which is about John Nash and his struggle with schizophrenia. And he eventually comes to see Parcher as a delusion and is able to get some degree of control over Parcher. So my Parcher deluded me like this. I would get the degrees and the awards and learn all the things, and then he would plant ideas in my mind designed to crush my confidence. And he would lie to me, and he would tell me I was getting too big for my britches, and that if I wasn't really, really careful, people are going to find out that I was a fraud. And sometimes that kept me from reaching for the next good thing, but not always. So when my Parcher thought I was out of my league, he let me know it. Like the time 3 years after I'd arrived at ETSU in 1997 as a freshly minted PhD. And I was walking up the stairs to the main doors of Dawson Hall because I had a meeting with the then president and the then provost and some other people to make a case for women's studies. And I felt like surely somebody more qualified should be having this meeting. I mean, the president, come on. And my Parcher told me as we walked up those stairs, he said, you're too little for this. And I said out loud, I'm too little. And I started to shake a little bit and feel kind of sick. But for some reason, I just kept walking. This is this interesting thing to me about my story is there's all this self-doubt, but this forward movement, I don't know where it comes from. I feel very fortunate about that part of it. And then somehow, I thought freakishly, I convinced my talk convinced the president, my talk and the large number of faculty who had shown up in force to show their support for the broad support for women's studies. So convinced him to fund women's studies and to call it a program instead of simply a minor, and to allow me the privilege of being its director, and to replace our $4,000 budget with a $25,000 budget so that we could fund campus programming and a little bit of travel. So the president was on board, but the provost wanted to slow the roll. He wanted to enter the possibility of the funding for the program into the budget process proper. But the president, to what seemed to be the provost's dismay, said, I'm ready to fund it now. And so he did. And I learned that day, something that I have to keep learning, that I might actually belong here. That higher ed leadership might in fact be my lane. And I learned that feeling small doesn't mean you are small. And then that same year, I had another revelation. I was giving a talk to a Watauga Counseling Association about gender stereotypes and where those come from, and I had this strange kind of brief out-of-body third eye experience, and saw myself giving this talk, and I thought, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know something, I have expertise, and these people are listening to me. This is very strange. Is it possible I do know what I'm doing? I remember that sort of moment. It's like emblazoned in my skull. So this and the other ongoing lessons I'm going to be sharing today are ones that, it should be noted, have to be learned over and over and over again. Many of life's lessons are like that, as you know. I've been learning and relearning that I am/am not an imposter for 50 years or more. Now, there are some tricky themes here. For example, it's a little tricky to be someone who identifies with imposter phenomenon, to be talking about it with any degree of credibility. So an imposter talking about imposterism, a little tricky. Also, it's tricky because there's no shortage of quite justifiable critique of both the language and the concept of imposter syndrome. The idea of syndrome being problematic because it suggests a purely medical, scientific phenomenon, and also because it situates the issue within the individual rather than point to any of a variety of social reasons why a person might feel like they should get back in their lane, like adverse childhood experiences, for example. Often the label is used to talk about concerns that women and people of color and folks from other marginalized communities have about feeling like they don't have the goods to be taken seriously, when in fact that message is communicated to them over and over again throughout their lives. So the phenomenon is actually located quite outside of them. The personal is political. But despite the critiques, feeling like an imposter is definitely a thing. Most people feel like an imposter at various times in their life, but some really struggle mightily and regularly with it. And there's really no way that's not going to affect your personal and your professional life. Imposter researcher Valerie Young notes that academe is a breeding ground for the thing. That rings true to my experience and what I've observed. I suspect there are a number of people in this very room who wrestle with it, who make sense of their successes with classic imposter explanations like, I mean, if I can do it, how hard can it be? Valerie Young talks about hearing a person say to her, I mean, if I can earn a PhD in astrophysics from Caltech, anybody can. We go, not really, though. That's the... or maybe imposter explanations like, I was lucky that time, or it was a fluke, or it was timing, right place, right time. It's really not me. Or they were just being nice. Or I knew someone who knew someone. Or it's my personality. I mean, they liked me. It wasn't really my competence or my intelligence or my accomplishments. They just, people like me. Or maybe you see your mistakes or apprehensions as clear evidence that the work you're doing is substandard, rather than evidence that, when you have mistakes, rather than evidence that it's a growth opportunity, which is what non-imposters think. Or who fret that their successes now throw things into question, like, do I even deserve this? Can I even bear to hear all these nice things that Phyllis is saying about me? And then, can I really handle the opportunity? Or sometimes who see their low interest in traditional masculine markers of success as proof that they can't hack it, rather than evidence that they frankly don't want it. These are all habits of people wrestling with an imposter self-concept, but these habits can be named and countered. New lessons can be learned. There are some effective strategies for managing or maybe even overcoming debilitating imposter feelings, including learning how to act and think like someone who doesn't live in imposterism. Sidebar, I'd like to start a group with other ETSU imposters to talk about this stuff, both to start a dialogue, but also to take a look at these habits and these strategies, take a look at the research and see if we can sort of turn things around a bit. And so if you're interested or know of any colleagues who might be, I hope we'll have a conversation. So I've recently learned that one of the strategies for transforming an imposter identity is to name and claim your successes rather than explain them away. So it is to that naming and claiming that I turn. My teaching and research interests have changed with time and largely with the ebb and flow of my personal life. When I was in PhD school and pregnant with my daughter, I took a class with my mentor, Bill Rollins, on communication in friendships. And my paper for the course was on women's friendships during pregnancy. And I couldn't wait to look at all the scholarship in this area. But then I didn't really find any. So then I didn't have a solid foundation to build up from, but I did find a gap in the literature. And importantly, I learned early in my academic career how to build a rationale in a literature review and justify a study from related literature and sometimes distantly related literature. But I also learned, again, and continue to learn it, how to not be thwarted when I'm doing something that nobody else has done yet. A vital professional and personal lesson. So then I started looking at women's own pregnancy discourse and found, again, little academic work on the topic, either in my discipline or related disciplines. And then as I talked with the women I interviewed for the research, I was struck by how the pregnant women themselves didn't really even know how to talk about themselves as a pregnant person in the world. Because the cultural discourse on pregnancy is so deeply rooted in science and gestation only. And even feminist work at the time really didn't talk about pregnancy. It talked a lot about birth and some about mothering. So I wrote my dissertation on women's pregnancy discourse. Now, when I got to ETSU, my beautiful daughter Chelsea was 6. And my beautiful son, Isaac, was tiny, 12 weeks. I was still nursing, and I would start each day with this ritual. I get in my car, I put the key in the ignition, I burst into tears and sob, I drive to work, and I lactate. In those early years, I published on teaching on gender and feminism and on family sex talk. But then as I started to get a grip on mothering 2 children and being a full-time professional, which, wow. I mean, I remember sitting in the car in the midst of all that sobbing one time, and I thought, working every day, 5 days a week for 8 or more hours is a lot of work. It's a lot. What are we doing? Of course, I was doing that in graduate school, but it was sort of spread out, interspersed. You didn't really catch it. But gosh, this is really sort of sucks. So as I started to get a grip on that, I started doing research on mothering and feminism, writing autoethnographic book chapters and journal articles that were grounded in my own reckonings as a mother. And at this point, I'm happy to say sobbing and lactating were not part of my morning ritual, so things had improved. And then I had a friend from PhD school who was editing an anthology on family communication that I was contributing to, and I thought, hey, she's got an edited book. I mean, she's not smarter than me, right? I could edit a book. My partner tried his best to redirect me, but a couple years later, I published an anthology, Mothering in the Third Wave. By the way, edited collections do not get near the academic cred that they should. They're very complicated. They're very time-consuming. You've got all of these different voices from all these different authors, and you're trying to create a cohesive piece from it. It's a real challenge, and they make important contributions to the discipline, and we need to get more credit for those. So the edited book cleared the way for me to be able to start imagining writing my own book. I was writing works for other people's books and journals on motherhood, but then I published my own book called Motherhood and Feminism, and it was a book for mother studies courses and lay audiences. And when I got the offer to do it, I was like, piece of cake. So I learned again. I learned that writing about scholarly things in a non-scholarly way, which seems like it would be a really great fit for an imposter, is really, really hard. Harder. I found it harder than writing academic, like journal work. So then I co-edited a book called Performing Motherhood, and then I joined a team to publish some work on cancer survivors, where I contributed. My contributions were the feminist thought and motherhood stuff. Do that feminist mothering thing you do. Come be on our team. I mean, really, that was like the extent of the conversation. Okay. So collaborative work is really tricky for an imposter because it's so easy to say that your part was small or insignificant and they were just nice to let you on the thing. That it's small in quantity or in impact. And then a colleague had gotten a major RDC grant. She was working on that grant, and I asked her about. I was like, what's that about? Can I get one of those? And you see how I was like, I'm looking around at what other people are doing and going, well, I could do that, I think. Let me try to do that. So she said they're very competitive, and my partner told me that's code for it's out of your league. But I gave it a go, and thanks to the sometimes brutally honest feedback from my colleague Melissa Schrift in sociology, man, that was rough. Dang. Okay. I got the grant, a $10,000 grant, and then my partner said, "Oh, sure, you can get the money, but can you do the research? And do you even know how to manage a grant?" So yes, turns out was the answer. And with it, I studied this push to make family meals more frequent because it was going to save the world, or at least all of the adolescents from all of the ills that they confront. I was concerned about the impact that this push would have on mothers, since they, you won't be surprised to learn, are primarily the ones who are compelled by family meals rhetoric. I was able to talk with 31 mothers because of the grant, and I was able to compensate them with money, and I was able to feed them dinner, and I was able to have childcare for their children while we were talking and feed their children. So that grant, the way that shook out, was really very important to me because it allowed me to do the work in a way that was really consistent with my values. So I wrote 2 book chapters and an article on family meals, and I was wanting to write more from that, but I was chair of a department, and I found it nearly impossible to immerse myself in so much qualitative data and run a department at the time with 36 faculty and staff. So chairing is where my energy went. Now, in 2016, my parents' health really started to decline, with my mother's vascular dementia and my father's Alzheimer's dementia making everything worse. And things got complicated fast, super complicated, as I'm sure many of you know from your own lives. And about this time, I was asked to join a cross-disciplinary team led by geriatric specialist Ron Hamdy in the med school. And we wrote a number of articles, 9, I believe, directed at family caregivers about helping them better understand and cope with their family members' dementia. And what I'm now learning as I work through this imposter business is to attend to the fact that I was invited to be on this team because of my family communication expertise, which suggests I must have some. And more importantly, that it wasn't just an opportunity that was given to me. This is the kind of thing that my partner would point out, that somebody had given you the opportunity. But it was also an opportunity that I seized and that I did something with, to the tune of 9 articles, I like to point out. But that time was a very difficult blend of personal and professional stuff for me. I didn't feel like I was doing anything well. I cried a lot. My parents were tanking. I'm writing about dementia and how families are overburdened while our family is it was really rough. And then Ron wanted us to turn to a book next. But I couldn't take any more immersion in the family illness of dementia, especially because some of my family relationships really started to strain at the time. My oldest sister and I were my parents' powers of attorney. She was the medical and I was the durable. And the ugliness just came out of the woodwork as formerly close relatives seemed to question or dispute or castigate every choice that we made. So I'd be immersed in and surrounded by the work of the department chair, and then the texts or the messenger stuff notifications would sound, and my anxiety would soar immediately in dread of the verbal interrogation that the notification represented. It was pretty awful. And I share that mostly as a reminder that, as I said to a friend and colleague earlier today, something that we already know but sometimes forget, that academic leadership isn't the only thing that academic leaders have going on. And I think we forget that sometimes. But of academic leadership, it's interesting because I chaired for 13 years, but it wasn't until I was out of the chair seat and also took a sabbatical to clear my head, but was out of the chair seat before I really felt like I was really able to reflect on that job and what it gave me and what I gave it and what it took from me. So here are some lessons, 4 quick lessons that I learned about being a department chair in the yearish or so in which I've not been one. And the first one is the importance of connecting with leaders, with peers. This is something I didn't do very much of. I think that's about the imposter thing, not feeling like a real chair. So I didn't hang with the chairs. But I started to tune into that in like my last year or two and developed some really lovely, close relationship with some good friends. I'm still connected with them, and we would go out and talk and mostly not talk about work. But sometimes talk about that. And those relationships were really very deeply important to me. So connecting with peer leaders is a critical thing. I still have those friendships, and they're very, very important to me. The second thing is to avail yourself of the training and mentoring. We didn't have chair training and mentoring in most of my time as chair. There just was, we had some elements of it. The Council of Academic Chairs would do some kind of sort of peer training kind of thing, and some other things. But we have a system now where it's consistent, and man, do that. It's really very important. I think sometimes academics are just like, I sort of know what I need to know. I'm an expert on this one thing, so I don't want any training on anything else because I'm an expert on this one thing. But those are really important. And the third one is to boldly confront your challenges and weaknesses, especially the ones you don't know about. And of course, the only way you can do that is if you talk to the people you work with to find out what those are, maybe developing an anonymous survey if you're interested in what they call a 360 assessment, to talk to the people that report to you. I can help you with that. But confronting those challenges and weaknesses is a tricky thing for an imposter because they're just sort of doing it all the time anyway. So why create a survey that proves it? Okay, and so then the last one is to be a coach. So what that means is don't answer, ask. Don't solve, ask. Ask empowering questions that helps people figure it out for themselves. This is just brought up on a very different leadership model. And coaching leadership as coaching is sort of all the rage, and for good reason. It's really difficult habit to break, especially when you know what the person could do if they come to your office to learn to ask empowering questions rather than tell them. Okay, so where am I now? Well, there was this little pandemic thing that happened. You might remember it. and managing a department in the midst of all of that, or as my students say, in the mist, with no D. Pat and I were on our way to work one morning, and we're driving past this cow pasture, and there was this low mist hanging. And I said, "Look at that mist; it's so pretty." And then he said, "I wonder if that's the mist our students are talking about." Probably. So that took up a lot of whatever research energy I had, and frankly, most of my department leadership energy. Until I started working on actively reimagining my imposter identity and immersing myself in that research, reimagining what my contributions to ETSU and the world could look like. And thanks to the Faculty Senate for years of advocacy for the Faculty Ombuds position and the generous support of the provost and a chunk of my own funds, which I got when my parents passed, I'm able to focus. I did a lot of training, and I'm able to focus on service. And Faculty Ombuds is one of the ways I'm doing that. So in that position, I assist faculty with difficult conversations and conflict resolution, as well as imposter and communication skill coaching. And meanwhile, I just turned 60, and I'm creating my retirement plan, which will be a consulting and coaching business for academic leaders focusing on these same topics. But until I retire, these services are free for ETSU faculty as the ombuds. So this has been my crafty life as an imposter, learning and relearning same old lessons over and over again. My parcher remains with me, always kind of slinking around in the background, but I'm getting better at letting those deprecations just kind of roll right past me. And I'm welcoming new lessons and growth opportunities as I use my work to make sense of the world in my own lived experience, and then to use that sense to make meaningful contributions. Thank you.